Okay, so today we're going to make the pizza that my mother and my aunt and my relatives used to make when I was a young fella. And we have the recipe, and it is down here on the table. I'm going to have Scott take a little video of it so that you can see what the recipe is, and maybe you can stop motion it to copy it. But if you look back down at the recipe, you'll see here where I've crossed out 4 3/4 and put in 5 cups of flour. That is because we are here in San Francisco and it's very humid here, and it seems that we need to put more flour into this recipe in order for it to be the right consistency. So that said, now we're going to start the recipe. This recipe is called Pizza Dough 222, and the reason for that is that it's 2 teaspoons of dry active yeast, 2 teaspoons of sugar, and 2 teaspoons of salt. Okay, so in a measuring cup, what you want to do is get, let's see, what is it? It's 2 3/4 cups of very warm water that you're going to proof the yeast in. Now I've had this running for a while, so it's already warm. And what I like to do first is put the sugar in, because that's what the yeast feeds on to make the dough rise. So I'll put that in, and I will stir it up. We can move these out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. Until the sugar is dissolved. Okay? And when the sugar is pretty much dissolved, you can put your 2 teaspoons of active dry yeast in there. Do not get rapid rise, just get regular active dry yeast. And what we're going to do here is proof the yeast, and that means that we're going to mix this all together and set it aside and wait for it to start foaming up. Once it foams up, then we know that the yeast is good and we can use it, and we won't screw up the rest of the recipe. So there, if you look at that, you can see that there is no yeast on top, and it's pretty much well mixed up in there. See? Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to measure 5 cups of flour into this container, which goes into the bread maker. Now, if you don't have a bread maker, you can use a stand mixer, like one over there, with a dough hook. But you need to knead the dough. No matter how you make it, you have to, once it's all mixed together, you need to knead it. So in a bread maker, it does it all by itself. In the stand mixer, you have to turn it on and knead the dough for 20 minutes or so. If you're going to just mix it by hand, then you have to knead the dough by hand for 20 minutes or so until it's a nice and smooth consistency. So that said, we are now going to measure the flour into this bread maker pan. And if you look in here, you'll see it has a little thingy that will knead the dough once you get it all with the yeast and everything. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Don't put the flour away until you're done later, because you're going to need it when you roll out the dough. So there's that. Okay, so in here I am going to put the salt. Remember I said 222? It was 2 salt, 2 sugar, 2 yeast. Don't put the salt with the yeast. It won't rise as well. So put that in there. And this also gets 1 tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil. Okay? So, we're going to put 1 tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil in here. Now I'm going to slip this back into the machine. And we got to make sure it's all engaged in there. And then if you look at the top of the machine here, come over here, Scott. It says number 7 is dough. So that's the selection I want, the 7. Okay, that's all right. So I'm going to go to 7 and just leave it, okay? And then when this starts to foam up a little bit more, it looks like it's doing okay. Then we'll pour it in there and let the bread maker make the dough. But in the meantime, these are the pans I'm going to use. They are 11.5 by 17.5 inches. This recipe makes 2 crusts that fit into these pans. So if you have larger pans, you're going to have to, figure out that you can make maybe 1.5 in a regular sheet pan, or, you'll have to figure that out. I have the right size pieces for this. So what I do to these is I put just a little bit of olive oil on each one, and then I take paper towel and I make sure that I rub the olive oil into the pan. You can tell that these are very well used pans because look at it. So I'm going to do that, and then what I do with them after that is I put them on the oven. Let me move these frying pans.
That got them dizzy.
Okay, I put them on the oven like this because there's a vent here on my oven that when I turn it on, the heat comes out of it from the oven. So when I take the dough out of this machine, I'm going to put it in a large bowl and cover it with a towel and put it on this and put the towel over the bowl. You'll see when I do it, so that the heat from the oven is going to help the dough rise. I only turn the oven on to 225 and then I shut it off because I don't want it too hot, it'll kill the yeast. So if you look at this, you'll see that it's starting to foam. See all that foam there? So we're going to take this, let me stir it up just a little bit more, and I'm going to throw this into here. So if you want to come over here, Scott.
I want to.
All right. We're going to throw that in there. We're going to close this, and then we're going to turn it on. Start. Now, according to the bread machine, it takes 1.5 hours for this process to happen. And what it does is it first mixes the dough with the yeast and the water, and then it kneads the dough, and then it lets the dough rise. At that point, we'll come back and I'll show you what I do with the dough once it has risen in the bread machine, because then it has to rise again. Actually, it has to rise 2 more times after it rises in the bread machine. Once in a bowl, and then we'll split it and roll it out, and then once in the pans. Okay? So we'll see you later. Until then. Okay, so we're back. It's 1.5 hours later. The dough has risen, and I'm going to take it out of the bread machine here and show it to you. Oops. See? It's starting to deflate now because I hit it, but that's okay. I want it to do that. And I have this big giant bowl, this big giant orange bowl, and I'm going to put some oil in it. Okay, some olive oil, and I'm going to rub that around the inside. And then I'm going to take this dough out of this pan. Like that, and I'm going to put it in this bowl. Now, I put oil on top of it so that it doesn't create a skin. If you don't put the oil on there, you'll get this hardened layer on the dough, and you don't want that. So we have the dough is all nicely oiled up, and we're going to put a towel over it, a nice thick towel. I usually use terry cloth, but these are nice and thick, so these are the ones I use now. And I have set the oven for a low temperature, and I let it preheat to that temperature. Now I turn the oven off. And what I'm going to do is take this bowl and put it over here and put the towel up over the back part of the stove so that the heat from the oven comes up under the towel and into the bowl and helps the dough rise. Now, that has to rise to the top of the bowl before we do anything else with it. Once it does that, we'll take it out, and then I will be holding the camera, and Scott will be measuring the dough. And what we do is just split it in half, so then I know that we have 2 halves this equal amount, and then I can roll it out and put it into the pans. So, once that's done, we'll come back and then do it again. And I'll show you what's going on with the sauce. The sauce I use, is contadina. That's what my mother used. I believe that's what my grandmother used. That's what my Aunt Lena used. And I put it in this pan, and then I'll put some basil on it, and I water it down with some water. Now, there's been some controversy over this method. My cousins believe it should be oil, but I think that's too much oil to water the sauce down with. So I use water. You know, I think it tastes just great anyhow. So you'll have to either use water or oil, but I suggest water. That's it. Go.
Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and measure out the dough. What we do is take all of the dough, and we first of all take it out, and we measure and zero it out again at the bowl, so now it reads 0. I'll put the dough in, measure how much it is, and it's somewhere around 1600, 1650. So I'm going to take half of it, and I'm going to put it in here, and measure it, and okay, so the other half then is good. And here is the one that we're going to start with. We'll leave the other one in the bowl.
Okay.
And go.
Okay, so now we're going to slowly do this. What I do is take the half of the dough, and with my hands I'll try and make it into sort of a rectangle, and I'll poke my fingers into it to help stretch it out a little bit before I do that. I've already put flour on my rolling pin, and I'm going to now try and roll it out so that it fits into this pan. Okay? So it takes a few seconds to do this. It's pretty elastic, this dough. And but if you persevere, it will happen. So let me just flip it around a little. There we go. Whoops. Don't want that to happen. I'm going to throw a little more flour on this so that the rolling pin doesn't stick to it. There we go.
Do you want to shut your oven?
No, I don't. Okay, I have the oven on, and I let it come to the right temperature, and I've left it open so that it cools off a bit because it was too hot. If I put the pizzas back in there right now, they will cook, and I don't want that to happen. I want them to rise in their pans before I put any toppings on it. So just a little bit more, and I think we'll be ready here. So I'm going to fold it in half, and then I'll fold it in quarters, and then I'll try and find the middle of this pan. And there. So now what I'm going to do is go around the whole pan and fold this dough over so I have a nice crust, because Scott likes the crust. And I like the crust too, but not as much as Scott does. So wherever there's extra, just fold it over. Try not to make a hole in it. But if you do make a hole in it, it's very easy to fix. Just take a little piece off like that, and then you would just stick it on there like a bicycle patch. Okay. So with just a little bit of pushing and stretching, it will all go into shape. So there we go. Okay, so now I'll cover it up with another towel, and I will put this in the oven, and I'll put this one in the oven. Sort of close the door, and let them rise again for another 15 or 20 minutes. Okay, so here we are back. The dough has had time to raise, and you can see how puffy it is. See there? It's uneven, but that doesn't matter. It just gives it that rustic look. Okay, and if you'll notice in the sauce, there's large pieces of basil in there that I put in there, and I heat it up just to, a little more than room temperature, because I don't want it to kill the yeast in the crust yet. So I'm going to take a ladle, and I usually put 3 ladles full on each pizza of sauce. I don't know, this looks like a half cup ladle to me, but it could be smaller, I don't know. So, and then with the bottom of the ladle, I push it around, and I like to get it up on the crust. If you see here how it's up there on the crust, because it tastes good up there. And so I'll just push it around and try and get some on the crust wherever I can. And then if you just shake it a little, it smooths out, as you can see. So we'll do that with this one. And what I'm going to do is put the cheese and the toppings on one of these. This could use a little more sauce, I think. And then we're going to try and use the time-lapse option on the iPad, like we did on one segment already, which we didn't mean to do. So there it is. These are ready to be loaded with your toppings. I personally like sausage on my pizza, so I usually make one that has sausage on it, and sometimes I put mushrooms. What
kind of sausage?
This is mild Italian sausage, and find the best sausage you can find that you like. This in California here is New York style Italian sausage, bought from either Lucky or Albertsons or Safeway. But I know in Chicago there's different kinds that people buy there, so buy the kind you like and put it on there. And my cousins usually cook this first, but it cooks very well in the oven, and there's no need really to cook it first, unless, I don't know why they cook it first.
Call them.
Yeah, call them. Call the Brigados. Look them up in the phone book. I don't care. But usually I just put it on there in a nice even row, because when I get my pieces of pizza, I want to have sausage on them. So this continues on until I'm done with the sausage. And then I will put some mushrooms on this. And then this next one
Will be whatever.
will be whatever. I see Scott has got some bell peppers, and we have mushrooms. But you know, you can put anything you want on it, really. But if you're going to put if you're going to put pineapple on it,
Don't call us.
don't even talk to me. I don't even want to talk to you, people, with the pineapple. So here we go,
Pineapple isn't for pizza, it's for fruit salads.
or something, or pineapple upside down cake, or whatever. But it's not for pizza. And but you can put whatever else you want there. I don't really care. You can put pineapple on. Who gives a shit? So there's all the sausage on that one. And I'm going to throw some mushrooms on this because I do like mushrooms as well. However, if you're going to put pepperoni on a pizza, I do suggest you cook it first because pepperoni has a lot of fat in it. And if you cook it first, you can get rid of a lot of that fat. And it won't be such a heart clogger and you know.
Not like the sausage.
The sausage doesn't have half as much fat as the pepperoni does. So there we go. Now, on here, I like to put, I usually get 2 bags of this cheese.
Show me the front.
This is the front. Okay, it's just shredded, grated, whatever, mozzarella cheese. And this is
2 pounds.
2 pounds. And I had a block of mozzarella cheese, which I think was a pound. So it's 3 pounds of cheese I'm putting on 2 pizzas. So it's 1.5 pounds of cheese on each. So I will go ahead and do that. Just put it on there nice and evenly. And then you can push it around with your hands afterwards. Because I like lots of cheese on there. You don't have to put this much cheese. Actually, you don't have to do anything from this point on. You can just make them how you like them. But I'm going to show you how I like them. And then I like to put a little basil.
What about that cheese?
I will in a minute.
Okay.
Put a little basil on here. Okay. Because that tastes good. Okay, so there's a little basil. And then I take some Parmesan, some grated Parmesan cheese, and I like to put that around the edges just to cover them up a little bit, and then a little bit on the top. Just like that. Okay? Now I will take some freshly ground pepper in our fancy schmancy little pepper thing that Scott bought for Christmas for me. There we go. And it's freshly ground. You put that all over the top. Nicey nicey. Make it nicey nicey. That goes out to Pam. I think she still says that. Okay. Then I'm going to get some oregano. And put that on there. On the top. And then some olive oil. This is the last thing we put on there.
What about this cheese?
That's going to go on this pizza. Okay. Okay. So this pizza is done. What we want to do is set the oven to bake at 350. When that comes up to temperature, we're going to put both of these pizzas in there, and they're going to bake for 40 minutes. And during the time that they're baking, we're going to spin them around so that the one side is where the other side was. And then we're also going to change shelves.
And you will have put it in the bottom and top third of the oven.
Right. So.
Is that it?
Yes. Okay, so Scott's, go ahead.
Go ahead, you do it.
Scott's going to turn the pizzas. As you can see, the cheese is starting to melt on them. Very nice. And switch shelves. So there he flipped it around, and he's putting that one in the center shelf. And then he's going to take the top one, or the other one, and put it on the top shelf. Flipped around and put on the top shelf. Okay. There you go. Okay, so we're going to look at see if the pizza's done by lifting it up with a spatula and looking at the bottom. And you can see that it's brown down there, and that's what we were looking for. So this is done. Now, look at that pizza. It's a beauty. We're going to put it up here. And check this one as well. This one is done too. So, we're going to put it up on top of the pizza, on top of the oven, I mean.
Why don't you show them one more time what the bottom's supposed to look like?
All right, why don't you look at it here?
Right here.
Okay. This is what the bottom should look like.
Perfect.
Okay. Are you? Okay, so what we're going to do, we've let them sit for a little while. And that's probably a good idea because we want them to, here, we're going to make sure they're unstuck from the sides. We want to make sure that when we cut them, the cheese just doesn't all run all over the place. And that's the reason to let them set for a while. Okay. And then we're going to cut this into three cuts longwise, and then as many cuts as we want the short way, so that we have squares.